How did the Tim Drake Robin commit a murder, and how was it almost the end of Robin? Let me walk you through a recap of the 1993 run of Robin, issues 123 through 128. Make sure to check out the full War Games Comic Club for even more context. As a quick fire reminder for anybody struggling to remember who all Bruce Wayne, aka Batman's, proteges are, a quick rundown of the Robins and Batgirls at that point in time of 2004/2005. Robin 1 was Dick Grayson, who grew out of the role and became Nightwing, independent of Batman, protecting his own city of Bloodhaven, having recently let the death of Blockbuster happen in front of him. Nightwing is not dating the second Batgirl during this time. Robin 2 is dead, crowbarred and blown up in a shed full of explosives with his biological mother in Batman: A Death in the Family. Check out the YouTube upload of that comic club for additional details. Batgirl 2 was Barbara Gordon, who after being paralyzed by a gunshot wound now fights crime from a wheelchair as Oracle, a tech genius who coordinates the movements and research for the Bat Family, the Birds of Prey, and at times the Justice League. At this point in time, she might just be the most important person in DC's superhero community. Batgirl 3 is Cassandra Cain, the daughter of professional killers, not even taught how to speak as her dad saw it as a useless skill to teach the perfect killing machine that he was training. Seeing Batman with his no-killing morality after a mission in Gotham, she defected from her father during the events of No Man's Land, her abilities being able to read the slightest body movements to predict combatants' fight moves before the combatants even know their next move, making her an invaluable asset in Batman's fight against Gotham's criminal element. Robin 3 is Tim Drake. Previously for Tim Drake, 1989's A Lonely Place to Die by Marv Wolfman, George Perez, and Jim Aparo collects Tim Drake's 5-issue journey to becoming the third Robin in the Batman and New Titans comics. Tim deduces the true identities of Batman and Robin, seeing similarities in the acrobatic movesets of Dick Grayson the Acrobat and Nightwing the Superhero, making Tim the only Robin to have ever worked out Batman's secret identity. Tim takes up the Robin mantle, not from a desire to be Robin, but because in order for Batman to be their best, Batman needs a Robin to balance out Batman's darkest instincts. In 1990, the Detective Comics arc Rite of Passage saw a voodoo cult kidnap Tim's globe-trotting parents, Janet and Jack Drake. Batman takes down the cult, but Jack and Janet were poisoned before being rescued. Tim's mum, Janet, dies, while Jack Drake, his father, was left in a coma. Batman brought Jack back to Gotham, and Tim became Bruce's latest ward. Some months after their return, in the 1993 Robin series, Jack awoke from his coma, but the poisoning had left him unable to walk or stand. The loss of his wife, combined with the realization that his pre-coma lifestyle wasn't what was best at raising Tim, led Jack to desire to be more involved and closer with Tim. Tim's duties as the Boy Wonder meant that closeness with Tim has been tested as the number of secrets and lies between the two build up. It's worth noting that Tim, having a parent that was alive when he first became Robin, who was an active part of his life when not comatose, is a large cornerstone of what helped set Tim Drake apart from the other mostly orphaned Robins. Jack Drake is aware of Bruce being a part of Tim's life during Jack's coma and is confused why the mentorship has continued now that Jack is in the picture. You see the balance of Tim trying to be a vigilante while keeping the rest of his life together and feeling guilt at not telling his father. Jack Drake does genuinely try to be a good parent to Tim, though often misguided in how Jack goes about it. A mission gone awry seems Tim Drake disappear for a month, and the cover story, not painting Tim in the best light, gets Tim sent to boarding school so Jack knows where Tim is at all times. In time, Jack regained the use of his legs with the aid of physical therapist Dana Winters. Although Dana was more than 10 years younger than Jack, attraction grows between Jack and Dana, and they begin dating. Dana's involvement in the Drake's lives was a blessing, as she was able to curb Jack's anger at his son being so distant and helped him feel more connected to his father. In time, Jack and Dana married. Soon afterward, Jack's company went bankrupt and the Drakes lost their mansion home, and Tim had to be pulled out of boarding school. The loss of Jack's profession caused Jack to reflect on his life, slipping into a depressive period as unresolved trauma and grief surrounding his late wife Janet surfaced. Jack eventually did recover, though. Tim Drake is unique from other Robins as the most proficient detective, a great computer specialist. He's selfless, and Tim's the nerdiest Robin who's into computer games, D&D, and skating. Tim's intellect is most accurately expressed as being an efficient strategist, good at forward planning. To Nightwing, Tim is a non-biological brother, and while Batman doesn't pick favorite Robins, some of Batman's actions, including one in today's comic club book, speak pretty loudly that Tim is a contender for the title of favorite Robin in Batman's book. Previously for Stephanie Brown. Then there is Stephanie Brown, first appearing in Detective Comics in 1992. Having gone by the codename The Spoiler, donning the mask to spoil the crimes of her supervillain father, Arthur Brown, the Clue Master, a third-rate Riddler knockoff, and place him behind bars to protect her mum and herself. Tonight will be the story of how Stephanie Brown was very briefly Robin. In 2005, when these issues are set, Stephanie has never been Batgirl, Jason is still dead, and other Robins after her and Tim do not exist yet in the main DC timeline. When the ongoing Robin series was launched, the writer decided to use Spoiler as a foil and eventual love interest for Tim Drake. For a large part of the series, even while the two characters dated, Robin deduced and used Spoiler's secret identity, but Spoiler did not know Robin's because once you know one identity in the Bat family, it gets pretty easy to start working out who the rest are. Robin initially found Spoiler an annoyance, but over time, they would sometimes work as crime-fighting partners, and as feelings develop, Tim breaks up with the civilian girl that he's been dating to start dating Stephanie instead, though the two have quite the on and off-again relationship, though not dissimilar to 20th century Barbara Gordon and Nightwing in dynamic. Stephanie's mother, Crystal Brown, is a trained nurse who struggled with pain pill addiction she was more likely to relapse to when Arthur Brown was around in her life. Crystal has struggled Steph's entire life to set boundaries with Clue Master, his name even on her mortgage, so Crystal can't toss him on the streets between his stints in jail. Once, when Stephanie was young, Crystal had to be taken to rehab by Arthur leaving one of his friends to babysit who attempted to sexually assault the young girl. She managed to fight her attacker off and escape, but when she returned home later and told her father, Arthur accused her of lying and told her to never mention it again. When Stephanie later took up the mantle of the Spoiler, one of her first missions was to take Arthur's friend down, only to learn he'd died from an overdose 8 days after she told her father what had happened. While Clue Master and Stephanie Brown were consistently drawn, Crystal being a tertiary level character at best with no character design template, so with a cavalcade of artists on the Bat books would often show up with varying appearances of different hair colors, styles, and body type. A combination of Crystal's addiction and pressing work schedule meant Crystal was frequently an absentee mother for Steph, but there are times where you can see Crystal really try to be there for Steph. Between her terrible father and underwhelming mother, Stephanie craved acceptance from other adult figures in her life, willing to be recklessly dangerous if it meant she could prove herself. In 1998, Stephanie Brown was the center of a teen pregnancy storyline. The father, a sleazy older guy called Dean, who she was seeing for a little while off-panel, who left Gotham during the events of Batman Cataclysm, when Gotham was rocked by an earthquake. This Stephanie story arc garnered a lot of positive press at the time, but while it's maybe a story worth exploring, this was the main example of Chuck Dixon, who normally kept his writing in the various Bat books of the 90s and 2000s centrist ideologically, showcasing Dixon's real political ideologies. Dixon is a hard, right-wing conservative that was a Comicsgate sympathizer for many years and ended up putting a lot of disgusting anti-abortion verbiage in Tim Drake's mouth, and abortion was never even mentioned or considered an option in that story arc. Instead, she gives birth and puts the baby up for a closed adoption. The baby was never and has never been seen again. Robin was a more supportive birthing partner than the birth father was. There's a proud Bat family tradition of being masters of disguise, using a mix of acting skills and a mix of wigs, makeup, and face putty to transform themselves into other aliases to go undercover. Alfred and Batman did it quite a bit, the most famous example being Batman having an alias since 1972 called Matches Malone, a low to mid-level gangster Bruce would pretend to be in order to gain street-level intel about the criminal underworld, which Batman could then use in his fight against crime. Bruce's Matches persona would include a different hairstyle, a fake mustache, glasses, a New Jersey accent, a pair of shades, and a signature match that he'd suck on. Robin, taking after Batman, and Stephanie, not knowing Robin's real identity, would take off the mask, slick back his hair, don a pair of shades, and apply fake stubble, and go by the alter ego Alvin Draper to take Steph to her Lamaze classes without raising suspicion with her mum or the parenting group. Tim would also use the Alvin Draper alter ego to go undercover and enroll in an evil ninja training camp committing amateur crimes. Not relevant to this story, but just a fun detail. When Dean eventually did return to Stephanie's mother's neighborhood, it's clear he's heard the rumors about Steph's pregnancy, suspected it was his, but never bothered to follow up with her till a chance run-in, then hearing she gave the kid up for adoption, figures there's nothing standing between them hooking up again, an offer which Stephanie rightly responds to with a swift kick to Dean's reproductive organs, followed by 2 knockout punches, the second after Crystal warns Steph that Dean is getting back up from the first punch. As Crystal was putting away Steph's maternity clothes post-birth, she discovered Steph's spoiler outfit. After initially freaking that Steph was becoming a supervillain like her father Arthur, Steph explained she was responsible for taking Cluemaster down multiple times. While Crystal enjoyed that irony, she forbade Steph from getting into costume again, an edict that Stephanie would ignore. A historical recap of where we are up to in the Robin comics. At this point in time, Stephanie has learnt Tim's identity, told by Batman when inquiring of Tim's whereabouts after Robin disappeared from Gotham for several days on a secret Tibetan mission with no means of communication. Tim was furious with Batman because Batman's secret identity was his to disclose, not Batman's. If this can't be interpreted as a queer allegory for being outed by a loved one to another person when you aren't ready, I don't know what is. Spoiler began getting some sporadic training from the Birds of Prey's Oracle and Black Canary, as well as some lessons from Batman, though Batman quickly decides she is not crime fighter material, telling her to hang up her costume and get the Birds of Prey to cut ties. Steph doesn't listen and continues heading out to fight crime secretly to prove herself to her mother, to the Birds of Prey, and to Batman. Stephanie and Crystal also learn that the Clue Master apparently died in the 2001 Suicide Squad series, though we learn after the events of War Games that reports of Clue Master's demise were, in fact, inaccurate. The writer for the Robin comics we're covering tonight is Bill Willingham. Bill Willingham has allegedly been an openly conservative pro-Israeli comic writer and artist, very active on social media and various websites over time. As we've previously discussed in Comic Club chats, he's also the creator of Fables, the beloved series and controversial metaphor about fairy tale characters brought into the real world. He worked on the ongoing Robin series from 2004 through 2006, doing approximately 27 issues, his run starting with issue 121 and concluding with issue 147. In Robin issue 121, we're given a mini reset to the Robin comic status quo with 16-year-old Tim Drake starting his first day at a new school called Lewis E. Grieve Memorial High School as a junior. Tim's status dating Stephanie Brown is carried over from earlier comics, quickly becoming a source of guilt for Tim when he experiences instant teenage hormonal attraction towards Darla Acquista, she-her, a fellow student whose father, Dr. Henry Acquista, he-him, is a crime lord with strong ties to Gotham organized crime. Making a mental note of the Acquistas, they're pivotal to a lot of tonight's story. There's one other student of name-worthy note introduced in these issues, Bernard Dowd. This version is cocky and full of himself, considers himself a personable everyman who can flit between all the social cliques in school, is a conspiracy theorist who reckons Batman is a government stooge, who uses orphanages he owns as recruitment grounds for the kids who become Robin, and Bernard will purport very loudly to having a massive crush on Tim's stepmother, Dana Winters, to Tim's face. Willingham has been very clear that his original conception for Bernard was a pretty surface-level girl-loving guy, but because DC does work for hire, creators don't own the comics or characters they create in most cases, and so a character can be rebooted a decade and a half later with a revised and frankly better personality and be openly gay. People can read that same scene now with a queer lens and read the same scene of Bernard loudly saying Tim's stepmother is hot as a gay kid who's overcompensating and doing what he thinks society expects of straight guys, still early in his journey to working out that he's gay. A newer comic can redefine an older work and add new layers where there were previously none, which can be one of the great things about comics sometimes. Some of Dr. Henry Aquista's gunmen moonlight for themselves, holding up a Star Labs armored car. 7 are apprehended by Batman and Robin at the crime scene, but an 8th gunman gets away with a classified military object. Mr. Aquista, learning about these unsanctioned crimes, sends an enforcer called Johnny Warren to collect his cut and reinforce who the boss is, and decides the jobs for those gunmen. Johnny kills the 8th gunman, and the military object bonds to Johnny, embedding like a giant cylindrical demonic talking spike through his chest. Robin, figuring out the identity of the 8th gunman, arrives at the gunman's apartment, Johnny having just killed the gunman inside. Johnny and Robin fight, giving Tim a black eye, and Johnny narrowly escaping after shooting the dead gunman's girlfriend, who Johnny had been harassing. The black eye horrifies Jack and Dana when Tim comes home, and he justifies the injury by saying he tried out for football after school. The weird military spike demands energy, and Johnny sucks the life force out of his own mother, leaving a withered husk behind to sustain the spike. Johnny repeats this on a handful of police officers and some of Henry's goons. You can see an example in the top left of this slide, and believe me, be grateful I chose one of the less gnarly panels. There was another panel in the same issue where it's showing eyeballs out of sockets and flesh peeling off finger bones as Johnny doing that life suck. Johnny, imbued with various abilities, and Robin, aided by Stephanie in costume as the spoiler, fight again. The artifact burning through the energy Johnny consumed from the others, then feeding off Johnny. Johnny refuses to stop fighting. When Johnny, running on fumes while looking like a levitating, nearly headless corpse, threatens to take a badly injured Stephanie's life force, Robin hits Johnny multiple times, seemingly killing Johnny in the process. In reality, Johnny's demonic spike put Johnny in a dormant state, as it was the only way to stop him from burning through their shared energy so fast. Once sufficiently recovered, Johnny walks off the morgue table and, laying low, resurfaces in Istanbul weeks later. Tim Drake, in the meantime, is left with the guilt of believing he has killed a man, even if Batman and Alfred aren't so certain. Batman tasks himself and Alfred to be drill sergeants, pushing Tim's training as hard as possible in the coming days. So Tim goes home, too tired to think and entertain the guilty thoughts that could plague Tim and destroy Tim's mind. 1993's Robin, issue 124, Good Parenting. At Tim's parent-teacher conferences, Jack and Dana learned Tim never tried out for football, the excuse Tim gave for the massive black eye Tim got from his fight against Johnny, though he fared better than Steph, who came away with a broken leg. 3 months after Tim has blamed himself for Johnny Warren's apparent death, Tim is unsure if he should continue as Robin. His heart no longer in it, Robin is doing worse in training, and Batman has grown tired of Tim using the excuses of being a murderer. Tim believes Bruce has lost trust in him, refusing to let Tim be Robin outside of the cave, but Bruce says he lost trust because Tim lost trust in himself first, so Bruce removes the weight of responsibility that Tim can no longer apparently carry. Alfred talks about when Tim first became Robin. Tim was full of a bright energy ready to tackle the world, seemingly capable of banishing the dark shadows of the Batcave after the death of the second Robin, Jason Todd. Instead, the opposite of what Alfred hoped happened. The Batcave has swaddled Tim in darkness. The mantle of Robin has beaten Tim down, becoming a burden. The murder of Johnny Warren, the final straw, breaking Tim Drake's spirit. Bruce will only let Tim use the excuse of seemingly killing Johnny Warren one more time, and that will be when Tim Drake quits being Robin. Batman gives Robin 48 hours to decide whether Tim wants to continue being Robin. Tim visits Stephanie, who has a broken leg from the Johnny battle, Stephanie persuading Tim that continuing as Robin is the right thing to do. In Istanbul, Johnny Warlock hires the assassin Scarab to kill Robin. This is Scarab's first appearance, and there'll be a recurring antagonist for Robin and Red Robin until the DC Universe reboot in 2011. They were reintroduced in the post-DC Rebirth world in 2021's Robins series by Tim Seeley, featuring all 5 of the main current and former Robins. Jack and Dana return to their house, where Jack rips apart Tim Drake's room to discover why he has been lying to them. Dana insists Tim is sweet and innocent and blames Stephanie for being a bad influence. Jack discovers the false panel in the back of Tim's closet where he finds the Robin costume and Tim's war journals, giving Jack more than enough context. Imagine you're Jack Drake. The incident that killed your wife left you comatose for months. You wake up to find some billionaire has befriended and looked after your son, which after being initially relieved, as strange as that dynamic is, you start to resent that person because your son seems to view this man to be as much a father figure as Jack. In fact, your child seems to prefer spending time with him. Jack claws his way through post-coma recovery to be the man and father that his son needs. Yet still, his son displays weird behavior, comes home with weird bruises, and so forth, only to learn that this billionaire playboy man has corrupted and indoctrinated his kid to seek out danger, going into scenarios every night that could get your son killed, all while wearing bright colors that make your kid the bigger target. This man was responsible for Tim disappearing from his safe new home in Keystone City and going into Gotham during No Man's Land, when the city, after being struck by a disease outbreak called Contagion and an earthquake called Cataclysm, had most of its civilian population evacuated, then was closed off from the rest of the United States, the city deemed uninhabitable as supervillains waged turf wars for scraps of a decimated city, which Jack then had to use a serious amount of resources and capital to get a rescue effort mounted to extract his son to safety. Jack Drake doesn't even know that Tim's childhood innocence has been ripped away, Tim believing he has murdered a fellow human. This man, Bruce Wayne, or Batman, has a legacy and a bank account that would make him untouchable. You've seen evidence of your son getting hurt because of this man's mania, drawing your child into the crosshairs of danger. Would you not be sad and scared that your child has experienced a cult initiate level of brainwashing in order to believe this kind of bizarre, deadly lifestyle is natural? This man has convinced his son to lie to him repeatedly and so casually it's second nature. Would that not make you justifiably angry? Jack, fueled by his anger, barges into Wayne Manor, not able to contain his fury towards Alfred, and upon heated demands that Master Wayne return at once to the manor, Jack confronts Bruce Wayne, demanding Bruce release his hold over Tim, returning his son to Jack Drake. Jack Drake knows that he probably doesn't stand a chance against a billionaire titan of industry who runs the city, who is also an urban legend that has been at the center of thwarting people with crazy levels of power for decades, and probably has the police in his pocket. But Jack Drake is desperate. Jack Drake is a parent who would do anything for his child. He wants his son back without any further harm to his child, and with this man's influence over his child ended. And so Jack Drake draws and holds a gun to the head of the monster that is Bruce Wayne, the monster that is Batman, and commands him to give his son, Tim Drake, back. Jack Drake is possibly the only non-police person to have ever held a gun against Bruce Wayne, also known as Batman, and been completely, morally justified in doing so. Audience thoughts on Robin issue 124. Laughing Seal's thoughts. Everyone but Tim is such a piece of work in this issue. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. Ammo didn't have much to say about this issue. They kind of felt like it was largely table setting for a big confrontation between Tim and his dad in the next issue. Bruce is such an a-hole to Tim during the practice fight. Ammo thought it was hypocritical for him to come down so hard on Tim for feeling guilty and depressed, when Batman himself has a reputation for being one of the moodiest, saddest, most guilt-ridden characters in DC Comics. Also, who the hell writes a parenting advice pamphlet that says you should search your kid's room and invade their privacy? Joshy's thoughts. Obviously, I come at this from a different perspective than that of the other Comic Club participants. Tim Drake's time as Robin is baked into my childhood. I've read every one of the 123 issues before this issue and the preceding Robin miniseries at least once, most multiple times over the years. For me, Jack Drake learning about Tim's alter ego is a payoff, an emotional Chekhov's gun that has sat loaded ever since Jack Drake woke from his coma. Alas, I can't make you all read every single issue with Tim and Jack that precedes this one. They'll give me enough years of Comic Club, and I'll darn well give it a red-hot go. Additionally, while the art by Francisco Rodriguez de la Fuente is exaggerated in its mannerisms, I'll point to the panels where Jack Drake learns Tim never tried out for the football team. The art functions the way comic art is always meant to. It tells the story and conveys the character's emotions clearly, even without dialogue boxes. There's lots of little details I love in this art, like Jack Drake visibly shaking with a mix of thinly restrained anger and nerves, or the positioning of the camera inside the panels, far out from Jack when he discovers the secrets inside the secret panel in the back of the closet to show the sense of helplessness and despair Jack feels for his son, or the low angle to make Wayne Manor look all the more ominous in the drive up to the confrontation. I was shocked to learn this was one of only 4 issues that De La Fuente has ever done for DC, and they've only co-penciled a single other comic issue outside of that work more than a decade later. 1993's Robin, issue 125, In the Shadow of Two Fathers. Bruce Wayne easily disarms Jack Drake. Jack insists that Bruce has some kind of hold over Tim, but that won't last after Bruce kills him to keep his secret. Bruce reassures Jack nobody is getting murdered tonight. Jack is free to go to the media after Bruce is done explaining. Robin returns to the Batcave rejuvenated from his chat with Stephanie and ready to return to being Robin with renewed vigor, only for his world to come crashing down upon seeing his father stood in the Batcave. Jack tells him to change out of his Robin playsuit into real clothes because they're going home now. Tim refuses to go, however, and explains that he is proud of the work he is doing. Tim compares what he's doing to what his grandfather did when he served in World War II at the age of 15. In Istanbul, the Scarab is researching Robin before she leaves for Gotham. She tells Johnny Warlock that no one has seen Robin for 3 months. Henry Acquista takes his daughter Darla out for her birthday, where she presses him about his job and how everyone at school is afraid of her because of him. She thinks Tim hasn't asked her out because of her father. Their conversation is interrupted by a phone call from Johnny Warlock, who orders him to start a gang war that will bring Robin out of hiding. Nightwing, summoned through the Butler Gossip Channel, joins Batman and Alfred in the Batcave. Nightwing is worried that too many people know their identities, and Batman reassures him that he has plans in case they are ever exposed. Tim and Jack finish talking and announce their deal. Jack won't expose their identities, but Tim has to quit as Robin. Community thoughts on Robin 1993, issue 125. Josh's thoughts. I think that while the art in the previous issue by the same team worked, some of the art in this issue pales by comparison, feeling outlandish and unsettling at times. That's not to say that there isn't some good panels, like during the convo between Alfred, Batman, and Nightwing. I really like the narrative choice for Robin after an existential crisis, choosing he wants to fight for being Robin again, only to have that decision torn away from him by events out of his control. Hamo Glitter's thoughts. Hamo was surprised that Batman truly terrible mentoring of Tim actually worked. There were a few funny moments that Hamo enjoyed, such as the scene of Robin coming into the Batcave and babbling on and on till someone told him his dad was there, and also Alfred offering to poison Jack Drake's dinner as a joke. But this issue was sorely lacking in superhero action. To break up the extended scenes of Tim's family drama, cutaways to Istanbul, to Stephanie's house, and to Darla's birthday are only mildly effective. Josh's counter there is just that those cutaways all mean more for those that have read the series before and will read the issues after the issues that we're covering tonight. Quick recap of 1993's Robin, issues 126 to 128. Tim Drake is adjusting to normal school, finding settling into being a civilian surprisingly easy. Darla surprise kisses him at school, but turns her down. Not because of the school rumor that her dad's a mob boss, but because Tim is in a committed relationship with Stephanie, though Darla struggles to believe he's telling the truth about his girlfriend who has never been seen. Not feeling dissimilar, probably, to Darla than the I've got a girlfriend in Canada excuse. Stephanie Brown becomes Robin to feel closer to Tim and gain Batman's approval. Batman's reasoning is that while Stephanie lacks the skills and talent currently, because perhaps they could be taught given her determination and stubbornness. Alfred isn't convinced this isn't a scheme to lure Tim back. Scarab pulls together a list of male teens that could be Robin and kills their way through a list of teens that physically resemble Tim across Gotham. Batman and Scarab fight to a standstill, and Batman agrees to let Scarab leave Gotham unimpeded in exchange for not killing Stephanie in her Robin costume, who disobeyed a direct order to not get involved from Batman, instead trying to assist before being promptly captured. Batman promptly fires Stephanie for being Robin and tells her not to bother suiting up as Spoiler either. Stephanie Brown does get one win during her brief stint as Robin, though it happens in the pages of Batgirl, where she and Cass Kane team up and stop Penguin from letting his henchmen with kids use the kids as gun mules. Looking at the page I've screenshot on the right of this slide, where highlighted is one of the main differences between being somebody wearing the Bat mantle is different to wearing the Robin mantle. The Robin outfit is bright and cheery. It doesn't scare innocent civilians and can be reassuring to children. So Steph, with the Robin costume and her words, is able to diffuse a tense situation in a way that Cass, as Batgirl in a Batgirl costume, can't. This was the only real win that Stephanie was allowed as Robin until the 80th anniversary of Robin saw the publishing of a one-shot flashback featuring a new story with Stephanie as Robin, where she's instrumental in taking down Firefly at an amusement park, though Batman is still not happy with her, comparing her to Tim, who would have waited outside and listened to Batman. To learn how an upset Spoiler becomes a mass murderer, causing chaos and destruction all across the city, tune in soon for the Comic Club of Batman War Games following the Robin trauma arc.